We talked about the arrow, the threshold, the idea that get is always, always about something crossing from one state to another. And that single idea unlocks almost every confusing use of get you will ever encounter.
But almost is not the same as all, and that is exactly why we are here in part 2. Because there are layers to get that go beyond the core metaphor. There are syntactic patterns, there are cultural variations, and there are traps. Beautiful, dangerous, embarrassing traps that even very advanced English speakers fall into.
The danger zone is coming, people. But first, the deep dive.
The deep dive.
Leo, I want to start with something that came up in a conversation I had with a listener recently. She wrote to us and said, I understand that get means change or movement, but sometimes I see get with no adjective and no object at all, like he got up, she got out, they got away. What is the rule there?
That is a brilliant observation, and it points to one of the most sophisticated uses of get, what linguists call the intransitive directional use. In these cases, get is paired not with an adjective or a noun, but with a directional particle, up, out, away, in, back, through.
And the particle does the heavy lifting in terms of meaning.
Exactly. Get up. The particle up tells you the direction of movement. Get out. The particle out tells you the destination. But here is the fascinating part. Get in these constructions is still carrying its core meaning. It is still marking the moment of transition. He got up means he was horizontal. He crossed the threshold. Now he's vertical. She got out means she was inside. She crossed the threshold. Now she's outside.
The arrow. Still the arrow, even without an adjective or an object?
Always the arrow, and this is what makes get syntactically remarkable. It can function as a transitive verb, I got the package. It can function as a linking verb, I got tired. And it can function as an intransitive verb, she got away. 3 completely different grammatical roles, but one unified semantic core.
And this is exactly why learners struggle, because they see get in 3 different grammatical structures and assume they are 3 different words with 3 different meanings, when in reality it is one word, one idea, expressed in 3 grammatical forms.
And the pedagogical failure, the teaching failure, is that most textbooks separate these uses into different chapters. Get as a verb of obtaining, chapter 3. Get as a linking verb, chapter 7. Get as part of a phrasal verb, chapter 12.
So, by the time a student finishes the book, they've met get 12 different times as if it were 12 different strangers.
When really, it was the same person the whole time, just wearing different outfits.
I love that. The same person in different outfits. Because that is exactly what it feels like, right? Get in I got the mail looks completely different from get in I got angry. But underneath, same character, same energy.
Same psychological setting. And that brings me to something I find deeply interesting, the psychological dimension of why English speakers reach for get specifically. Because remember, in many of these cases, there's a synonym available. I became tired. I received the package. I understood the lesson. I left the building.
So why does get win?
Agency and immediacy. Those are the 2 psychological forces behind get. When you say I got tired instead of I became tired, you're unconsciously emphasizing that this happened to you. It arrived. It came upon you. There's a slight passivity to it that feels honest in a way that became does not.
That's fascinating. So I got tired carries a tiny subtext of this was not entirely my choice. Tiredness found me.
Precisely. Whereas I became tired sounds almost deliberate, almost like you chose to enter that state. Get removes the agency slightly and makes the change feel natural, even inevitable.
And on the other hand, when get expresses immediacy, get going, get moving, it's the opposite. It's all agency. It's a command to someone to exercise their agency, cross the threshold now, on purpose, with intention.
Exactly right. And this dual quality, get as something that happens to you and get as something you're commanded to do, is part of what makes it so versatile. It can express both the passive and the active dimensions of change.
Let me add a story here because I think this psychological dimension becomes very clear in emotional contexts. Imagine a couple having an argument, and one of them says, "You always get so angry." Now, why get angry instead of become angry or just are angry?
Because get angry implies a process, a crossing. You weren't angry, and then something happened, and now you are. Get captures that moment of transformation. It implies that the anger arrived, it was triggered.
And also, subtly, it shifts the responsibility. You are angry is a statement of state. You get angry implies a pattern, a habit of crossing that threshold. It's almost a behavioral observation.
Aria, that is a genuinely sophisticated linguistic point. Get in the habitual present, you always get angry, implies a repeated pattern of state change, which is actually more damning in an argument than simply saying, you are angry.
English is such a strategic language when you look at it closely enough.
It truly is. Every word is doing more work than it appears.
Okay, let's talk about something that I know our international listeners are going to find absolutely fascinating, because get is not just universal in English, it actually behaves differently depending on where in the world you're speaking it.
This is one of my favorite topics because it reveals so much about how language and culture evolve together. Let's start with the most significant divide, American English versus British English.
And I think the most famous example here is the past participle. In American English, I've gotten better. In British English, I've got better.
Correct. And this is not a small difference. It's a fundamental divergence in how the two dialects treat the verb. American English preserves the distinction between got, the simple past, and gotten, the past participle. British English collapsed that distinction centuries ago and uses got for both.
So if a British person hears an American say, "I've gotten used to it," what happens?
Traditionally, a slight wince, because to British ears, gotten sounds archaic, almost theatrical, like something out of a Shakespeare play.
And yet, to American ears, gotten is completely natural, completely modern.
And here's the irony. Gotten is actually the older form. It's American English that preserved the original usage, while British English evolved away from it. So when British speakers call gotten old-fashioned, they're technically wrong from a historical linguistics perspective.
Oh, I love that. The Americans are the traditionalists in this case.
Language is full of these beautiful reversals.
Okay, now what about have got versus have? Because this is another area where British English and American English part ways significantly.
Very significant. In British English, have got is the standard way to express possession in the present. I've got a car, she's got an appointment, they've got tickets. In American English, have alone is perfectly standard. I have a car, she has an appointment.
So a British person says, "Have you got a pen?" and an American person says, "Do you have a pen?" and both are correct, just in different dialects.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting for learners. In casual American speech, have got is also used, particularly in spoken, informal contexts. I've got to go. Have you got a minute? So American speakers use it too, but perhaps less systematically than British speakers.
Impressed. And then there's the contraction that Americans use that British people sometimes find confusing. I gotta, as in I gotta go.
Gotta, which is a contraction of got to, is one of the most fascinating examples of get in reduction. In rapid American speech, got to becomes gotta and carries the meaning of obligation. I gotta finish this report, meaning I'm required to finish this report.
And this is something that learners who study British English first sometimes encounter and completely do not recognize. They hear gotta and think, what language is this?
Exactly. And it doesn't appear in formal writing, which means if you only learned English from textbooks, you've likely never encountered it. And then you watch an American movie and every character saying gotta and gonna, and your textbook English is suddenly useless.
Now, let's bring Canada into the conversation, because Canadian English is fascinating. It sits between American and British in some ways, but it also has its own character entirely.
Canadian English generally follows American patterns more closely than British, so gotten is used, have is common for possession, but Canadian speakers have a very interesting relationship with get in terms of directness and social tone.
What do you mean by social tone?
Canadian culture places a very high premium on politeness and indirectness, what sociolinguists call positive politeness culture. And this actually affects how Canadians use get in requests and suggestions.
Impressed. So instead of saying, get it done, a Canadian might say, could you maybe get that sorted, or would you be able to get to that soon? The get is still there, still doing its threshold work, but it's wrapped in layers of softening language that cushion the directness. So the arrow is still there, it's just padded with bubble wrap.
Beautifully put. The Canadian get has bubble wrap.
And this is actually incredibly useful for our listeners to know, because if you're going to live or work in different English-speaking countries, the same get phrase can land very differently depending on the cultural context.
Absolutely. Get it done.
And now, the danger zone.
I have been waiting for this. The danger zone is where we look at the mistakes that are not made by beginners. These are the mistakes made by intermediate and even advanced learners, people who have been studying English for years, because they involve subtleties that are genuinely difficult to see without explicit guidance.
And I want to say something before we go into these. There is no shame in any of these mistakes. Every single one of them is completely logical from the learner's perspective. The confusion always makes sense. It is the teaching that is not kept up.
Well said. Okay, danger zone trap number 1. Confusing get with be in passive constructions.
Oh, this one is so common.
In English, we have 2 ways to form a passive sentence. We can use be, the window was broken, or we can use get, the window got broken. And on the surface, they look almost identical, but they mean subtly different things.
What is the difference in feeling?
The window was broken is a neutral statement of fact. It describes a state. You are simply reporting that the window is now in a broken condition. But the window got broken, that carries an implication. Something happened. There was a process. An event caused this. Get in the passive always implies that the change was caused by an external force or event.
So the window was broken could describe a window that was broken when you bought the house. It was already in that state. But the window got broken means something happened recently. Something caused it to cross that threshold.
Precisely, and this distinction matters enormously in context. Imagine a parent coming home and finding a broken window. The child says, "The window was broken." The parent hears a neutral report of a state. The child says, "The window got broken." The parent hears, "Something happened while I was gone. There is an event here. Tell me more."
The child has just accidentally made themselves sound more guilty by using the more dynamic form.
Exactly. Was broken is the safer, more distancing choice. Got broken invites follow-up questions.
And advanced learners who know that get is used in passives often use it indiscriminately, replacing be with get everywhere without realizing they're adding this layer of implied causation every single time.
Trap number 2, and this one is particularly painful because it is so close to correct, using get with stative verbs.
Stative verbs. For our listeners who may not know that term, stative verbs are verbs that describe a state of being rather than an action. Know, believe, love, hate, contain, belong.
And the mistake sounds like this: I am getting knowing him better, or she is getting believing in herself.
And the reason this is such a logical mistake is that the learner knows get means change, and they want to express a gradual change in a state of condition. They're trying to say, I am gradually moving from not knowing him well to knowing him better.
Which is a completely valid thought. The problem is that stative verbs in English resist the progressive form. They do not like ing. You cannot say, I am knowing him. You say, I know him. And because you cannot use the progressive with stative verbs, you also cannot use get to mark the transition into that state progressively.
So instead of I am getting knowing him better, what is the correct form?
I am getting to know him better. You see, get to know, get plus the infinitive, is how English handles the gradual movement into a state of condition. The to creates a buffer that makes it grammatically acceptable.
Impressive. So the solution is not to abandon get, it's to use the right structure around the state of verb. Get to know, get to like, get to understand.
Exactly. I am getting to like this city, not I am getting liking this city. The to is non-negotiable with stative verbs.
Trap number 3, and this one is my personal favorite because it involves a very specific social situation, the difference between get and have when talking about causing someone else to do something.
The causative construction, yes, this is extraordinarily tricky.
So the two sentences in question are, I got someone to fix my car versus I had someone fix my car. On the surface, almost identical meaning. Someone fixed the car, you arranged it, done. But
the social implication is completely different. I got someone to fix my car implies effort on your part. You had to convince them, you had to persuade them. Maybe they were reluctant. I had someone fix my car implies authority. It was arranged without friction. It was simply done because you have the means or position to make it happen.
Impressive. So, I got the intern to stay late means you convinced them, possibly with some difficulty, but I had the intern stay late means you directed them to, and it happened.
Precisely, and in a professional environment, confusing these two can send very unintended signals about your position and your relationships in the workplace.
An advanced learner who uses got when they mean had, or vice versa, might accidentally sound either more authoritarian or more desperate than they intended.
Entirely unintentionally, because in their mind, the meaning is the same. Someone fixed the car. But to the native speakers here, the power dynamic is completely different.
And this is the level of nuance that separates good English from truly fluent English. Not the grammar, but the social signal embedded in the word choice.
The social signal in the word choice. That's the most important phrase from this entire segment. Write that down, everyone.
Because fluency is not about speaking without mistakes. Fluency is about sending exactly the signal you intend to send every time.
And get, this tiny 3-letter word, is sending signals constantly, every time you use it, which is why understanding it at this depth is non-optional for anyone who wants to communicate with true precision in English.
And on that note, part 3 is coming. Idioms, collocations, the interactive quiz, and our full wrap-up. It's going to be the most fun segment yet.
The most fun and possibly the most challenging.
Stay with us.